TV1.
This is the scene in Ferguson, Missouri last night as folks were out protesting there. The decision by the grand jury not to indict Officer Darren Wilson. It has certainly led to a tremendous amount of reaction all across the country. You name it, folks have been taken to the street. They've been protesting. And joining us right now is someone from Ferguson. She has been very involved in the various cases taking place there, not just the Mike Brown case, but also the aftermath. And that is, we found out about the court system there, how people have been targeted when it comes to warrants. And so it has been very, very difficult for a lot of people. And I think one of the things that we also have to focus on is that just like with Trayvon Martin, many people had no idea about ALEC, no idea about stand your ground laws until Trayvon Martin was killed. The death of Mike Brown has opened up a whole Pandora's box that has revealed a severe amount of injustice, not only in that city, in that state, but also across the country. So joining us right now on Skype is Missouri State Senator Maria Chappelle Nadal. First of all, Senator, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is certainly a difficult time there. Folks taken to the streets, and Antonio French said something on his Twitter feed that I thought was important. When he said that, he said, here you had protesters for more than 100 days, 104 days, who were organized and focused, and what took place last night, he said, tremendously hurt the progress that they were making when it came to addressing social justice there in Ferguson. Your thoughts?
He is absolutely correct. I have to tell you, after a month when Michael Brown was killed, I started teaching civic engagement classes twice a week, and we kept that up. In fact, we added classes so that my constituents can be empowered and know what it takes to make change in their communities. And sometimes our classes were very hard and the lessons were very difficult. But I have to tell you, our whole effort, and I worked with Antonio, and unfortunately our office that we shared was burned down last night, and that's unfortunate. But I have to tell you that we saw so many different successes. There were people who were former gang members who decided not to be part of a gang anymore. There were people who didn't even know who their council members were or who the mayor is, and ended up through our classes and through our guidance getting buildings dedicated to them, or donated to them rather, so that they could have youth programs. So what happened last night is completely opposite than what we expected. There are so many different organizations that are on the ground that are doing very good things, and we worked very hard to move the temperament from anger to positive action. And simply last night, there were a few people who decided not to use that positive energy that we had been trying to display for the last 108 days. And while others were protesting, the majority of people were protesting in peace and went elsewhere throughout the city and were better organized. There were some characters who were still in the crowds who completely denigrated our community, and that is unacceptable, and we're not going to tolerate it.
I want to go Chappelle on this one, because I think back to 1968. Dr. King is in Memphis, and they're leading a protest, and at the back of the protest, some young folks begin to break windows, begin to call to services. Cops come in, and he's shaken by it, and people begin to question his leadership, begin to attack him, and he says a few days later, we have to do another march to show them we can do this peacefully. The thing about that, Jeff, is that that movement understood organization, understood mobilization, understood that that if there's a negative reaction, that hurts the movement. Right. When I look at what took place last night, everything the senator just said, everything Antonio French said, everything folks have been doing, unfortunately, that gets hurt when those pictures, the videos of the burning buildings and the looting, that becomes the dominant storyline.
Well, it's totally undermined. It's undermined also when media doesn't cover the work that they do leading up to it.
Right.
So not only was what the state senator talking about true, there were over 100 trainings that took place over the last 100 days. And so it was done by a number of organizations, by multiple groups, and we saw the direct action that those organizations took place. So you and I had talked about the fact that, you know, this is the first movement in a long time that we we feel like is almost like Montgomery,
right,
where there's contained and consistent action on multiple levels that's sophisticated, that's hitting multiple targets. And so the reality is that last night, I don't think totally undermines it, but what it does, it paints a picture for those naysayers that want to say, where you have even folks that are supposed, well, you have journalists, quote unquote, that are talking about there are more unruly protesters out last night than there were peaceful, which is nonsense.
Right, absolutely.
And the reality is when you're running from tear gas, nobody looks ruly.
Right.
But the vast majority of the people that were out there last night were peaceful. And honestly, at some point, I think that, and this may not be said on air, but they're going to be peaceful protesters that the only people they're being violent against is some of those folks that raised hell last night. And you're going to see some folks that get run out of town, hopefully in the next 24 to 48 hours, so that these protests can continue the right way.
Cleo.
I have a potentially controversial perspective on this issue. I get why people go off and tear stuff down. Now, don't think that I support it or not support it. That's not the point. I get it because I was in Ferguson for almost a week. I did in-depth interviews with young people, all kinds of people. And what the media has yet to talk about, because I don't think it's interested, is that those people have been under a level of police terror that has been disfiguring and brutal and painful for decades. And what occurred was, finally, they had an opportunity to make that maybe change under the guise of this whole Darren Wilson, Michael Brown murder. And they thought that, okay, this has been going, we've been kind of complacent because we thought this was our fate, but we hated it. Now we have an opportunity to change it, and we get Darren getting nothing.
The bottom line is we live in a country.
One second. Lauren Jeff, then the senator. Go ahead.
We live in a country where black males are 21 times more likely to be shot and killed by the police. We live in a country where James Holmes can shoot 72 people in a theater and be taken alive, and this kid gets shot dead for stealing cigars or jaywalking, whatever lie they want to make up at the moment. That's the country we live in. So when there's violence like this, I'm not surprised. I'm not sure, Cleo, why you're apologizing for sounding like you may in some way want to endorse violence. I don't endorse violence, but when these problems don't get fixed and we see this over and over again, it doesn't surprise me.
There's something that the media is not saying. This was contained rage. And so when you have the ability to attack police officers, but you only attack police cars, that's contained rage. That's not unruly rage. And so I agree with you. I think that what we saw was some folks that understood what statements could be made. I think the problem is that there are different people that burn down black businesses than burned up police cars.
The bottom line is we live in a country where if you have a police uniform on and you kill somebody who's a black male, chances are you're going to get away with it. And the people who are rioting and burning stuff down realize that in the clearest terms. So I'm not trying to justify what they're doing in any way.
So nobody's dismissing your point.
My thing is.
Hold tight 1 second. I want you to pick up on that point. We come back. Senator Nadal, stay right there. We're going to continue this conversation. We come right back from this break. It's 27 minutes before the top of the hour.